They tell you that to be alone is to be broken. That solitude is a symptom, not a choice. From the moment you enter this world, you are taught that your worth depends on others, their opinions, their attention, their approval. Society never teaches you how to be by yourself. It teaches you how to perform, how to smile at the right times, how to belong, how to chase connection, even when it costs you your peace. From school classrooms to social networks, the message never changes. If you're alone, something is wrong with you. You grow up believing that silence is punishment, that weekends without plans mean failure, that solitude is a sign that no one wants you. But what if the opposite were true? What if solitude was never the enemy, but the doorway to everything you've been searching for? The modern world worships noise. It fears the quiet man, because a man who can sit alone, truly alone, cannot be controlled. He does not chase approval, he does not conform, he does not need permission to exist, and that makes him dangerous. You see, the crowd wants you busy, always surrounded, always distracted, always consuming. Because the moment you stop, the moment you withdraw, the illusion begins to crack. You start to see that most of what society glorifies, the constant chatter, the endless networking, the desperate pursuit of being liked, is nothing but a distraction from emptiness. Most friendships are built not on understanding, but on mutual avoidance of silence. Most conversations are noise disguised as connection, and most people fear solitude not because it's painful, but because it's revealing. When you are alone, the masks fall off. You start hearing the voice you've ignored for years, your own, and that voice doesn't flatter you. It doesn't lie. It asks the questions you've spent your life avoiding. Who are you when no one's watching? What do you truly want? What have you become just to be accepted? That is why solitude terrifies people, because it strips away their illusions. The truth is this: society profits from your dependency. Every ad, every post, every product is designed to remind you that you're incomplete, that you need something or someone to feel whole. But a man who has mastered solitude cannot be sold. He cannot be manipulated. He knows that peace isn't found in the crowd. It's found in clarity. Arthur Schopenhauer once wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. If he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom." He understood that solitude is not isolation. It is liberation. When you step away from the noise, you stop living as a reflection of others and start living as a reality of your own. But that's not what the system wants. The system thrives on the man who fears his own company. It rewards the one who conforms, not the one who questions. And so the cycle continues. Men chasing validation, relationships built on dependency, and lives spent performing for approval that never truly satisfies. They told you that being alone means you're unloved. They never told you that being constantly surrounded can mean you're lost. Solitude is not the absence of love. It's the presence of truth. It's where you stop chasing the world and start building yourself. It's where you learn to think, to feel, to see without distortion. Because only when you walk alone do you see how artificial the noise has become. Only then do you notice how much of your life has been scripted for you. Only then do you realize that the crowd was never your comfort. It was your cage. Society fears solitude because it births independent thinkers. It fears silence because silence breeds awareness, and awareness destroys manipulation. So they'll keep telling you to stay connected, to stay social, to stay normal. But normal has never created greatness. Normal has never produced truth. Normal has never led to peace. The man who learns to stand alone discovers something the world can't give him: freedom. And once you taste that freedom, there's no going back. You'll stop chasing empty friendships. You'll stop needing to be seen. You'll stop begging for attention that distracts you from your own becoming. The crowd will call you distant, cold, arrogant, but they'll never understand that you're not walking away from people. You're walking toward yourself, because in solitude the noise fades, the illusions collapse, and what remains is something unshakable: clarity, conviction, peace. They told you loneliness was a disease, but what if it's the cure? When Schopenhauer withdrew from the public world, people called him bitter. When Nietzsche left the universities and vanished into the mountains, they called him mad. And when Marcus Aurelius chose silence over the politics of his empire, they called him detached. But what all three men shared was not despair. It was vision. They understood something that most of us have forgotten. The mind cannot grow in the noise. It can only grow in the quiet, Philosophers throughout history discovered that solitude is not an escape from the world. It is the workshop of the soul. Every great idea, every timeless insight was born not in the crowd, but in the silence of one who dared to be alone. Schopenhauer walked the streets of Frankfurt, avoiding the social circles of the elite. He preferred long, solitary walks, thinking about existence, the will, and suffering. People thought he hated humanity, but he didn't. He simply refused to be drowned by its illusions. He believed that solitude purified the mind, that being alone stripped life to its raw truth. It freed a man from imitation, from envy, from the unconscious infection of the crowd. He once wrote, "The more a man has in himself, the less he will need from the outside world." It's a brutal line, but it's also liberation. Because once you realize that everything you've been chasing, the validation, the belonging, the constant company, has been a distraction from your own potential, you begin to see the beauty in distance. Solitude is where the mind stops performing and starts perceiving. Where your thoughts, once scattered by the world's noise, begin to align into clarity. It's not comfort you find there, it's confrontation. Nietzsche understood this better than anyone. He spent years walking alone through the Alps, writing in silence, thinking about the birth of strength. He saw solitude as the crucible where the weak are broken and the strong are reborn. Great men are like eagles, he said. They build their nests on some lofty solitude. In those words lies a law of nature itself. The higher you rise, the fewer stand beside you. The air becomes thin, the silence deepens, and that's where clarity begins. The philosopher's solitude was not emptiness, it was power. It wasn't withdrawal from life, it was engagement with truth. While the world shouted, they listened. While others sought distraction, they sought depth. Marcus Aurelius, ruling the largest empire in the world, carried within him the heart of a monk. In the chaos of war, betrayal, and power, he wrote quietly to himself, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." Even as the emperor of Rome, he knew that peace was not found in palaces or people, but in solitude with one's own reason. These men weren't running from society. They were transcending it. They saw what happens when you never stop moving, never stop talking, never stop seeking. You become lost, not in others, but in yourself. Solitude was their rebellion. Because to step away from the noise is to step out of control. It is to refuse the script society writes for you. And that's why solitude feels like death at first. Because in a way, it is. It's the death of the false self. The identity built from approval, imitation, and conformity. When you're finally alone, all that collapses, and what's left is raw, unfiltered, terrifying truth. But only through that death can something real emerge. Only through solitude can you hear what life has been trying to tell you all along. You begin to see how much of your suffering was caused, not by solitude, but by the fear of it. You begin to realize that connection without authenticity is emptiness with noise, that being surrounded by people who don't understand you is lonelier than silence. In solitude, the mind becomes honest. It stops rehearsing its lies. It faces itself. And in that confrontation, something sacred happens. Self-awareness. Every philosopher who has ever shaped civilization went through this transformation. It is no coincidence that prophets, poets, warriors, and thinkers all share the same journey: withdrawal, reflection, revelation. Because wisdom does not come from talking. It comes from listening. And the only place where the noise of the world cannot reach you is within yourself. In solitude, time changes shape. The minutes stretch into thoughts. The hours turn into clarity. And slowly, the man you've ignored begins to return. You start asking different questions. You stop chasing and start creating. You stop running and start observing. This is what solitude does. It separates the essential from the trivial. It breaks down the illusions of importance that society feeds you. You begin to see that most of what people call life is just reaction, endless movement without meaning. But when you are alone, you begin to choose. You begin to direct. You begin to build. And that is why the philosopher sought solitude. Because solitude is not a retreat, it's the forge. It's where the mind is tempered, where the self is sharpened, where the weak man dissolves and the strong man is born. Yet few will ever understand this. Because solitude has a cost. It demands silence, patience, and honesty. 3 things the modern world fears most. Most men today confuse activity with purpose. They think movement means progress. They fill every moment with noise because the quiet feels unbearable. But what they're really avoiding is the mirror, because solitude shows you who you really are, and if you've built your life on illusion, that truth will burn. But for those who endure it, solitude becomes a sanctuary. Not the emptiness of absence, but the fullness of being. Not loneliness, but liberation. The philosophers weren't running from people. They were walking toward depth. And in doing so, they found what every distracted man is secretly starving for: stillness. They proved that wisdom is not found in crowds, but in clarity. That freedom is not in having more, but in needing less. That solitude is not the enemy of life. It's the foundation of it, because in solitude you don't lose the world. You rediscover it, one honest thought at a time. Have you ever noticed how uncomfortable people become when there's silence in a conversation? How quickly they reach for their phone, how their eyes dart away, how the quiet feels like pressure. That discomfort is not random. It's a symptom, a signal of something deeper. The truth is, modern men don't fear being alone. They fear meeting themselves. From the moment we're born, we're taught that worth is external. A grade from a teacher, a like on a photo, a promotion from a boss. Every part of our lives becomes a mirror reflecting back what others think we are. And in that reflection, we lose ourselves. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." What Jung understood was this: most men are not living their lives. They are living their conditioning. Every habit, every belief, every pursuit has been inherited from a world that fears individuality. So when a man sits alone, the noise stops, and the unconscious begins to speak. He hears the questions buried beneath distraction. He feels the emotions he's avoided for years, and he realizes that the person he's been performing as is not the person he truly is. That's why solitude feels unbearable, because it dissolves identity. It exposes the void underneath. Silence is not empty, it's full of truth. But truth is painful when your life is built on lies. The average man spends his entire existence running from himself. He fills his days with stimulation, music, scrolling, talking, watching, anything to drown out the quiet hum of his own thoughts. Because when he stops, he senses it, that uncomfortable awareness that something inside him is unresolved. It's not loneliness he fears. It's recognition. Recognition that his life might not be his own, that his relationships might be built on dependency, not love, that his ambitions might be borrowed from the crowd, not born from purpose, that he has been shaped by everything except his own will. And so he avoids silence like it's death, because silence doesn't comfort as it confronts, but the confrontation is necessary. Because in that moment of stillness, when there's nowhere to hide, the psyche reveals its truth. This is what Jung called the shadow, the repressed parts of ourselves that we bury to appear acceptable. Our anger, jealousy, fear, insecurity, all the impulses society teaches us to deny. We push them down until they become strangers living within us. And yet those hidden parts never disappear. They influence every decision we make. They shape our desires, our addictions, our failures. When you're constantly surrounded by others, you can ignore the shadow. But when you're alone, it steps forward. It speaks. And what it says isn't pretty. That's why solitude is terrifying. Not because it's quiet, but because it's honest. In silence, you can no longer blame anyone else. You can't distract yourself with comparison or attention. You see your life exactly as it is. And that's unbearable for most men. But here lies the paradox. The same silence that exposes your pain also heals it. Because awareness is the first step to freedom. When you stop running from the parts of yourself you despise, you begin to understand them. And when you understand them, you stop being controlled by them. That's the hidden psychology of solitude. It's not punishment, it's purification. The silence that once felt suffocating becomes space, and the vast, open, liberating. But very few will ever reach this point. Because the world has designed itself to keep you distracted. The modern man lives inside a psychological cage built from notifications, conversations, and endless noise. He's always connected, yet never connected to himself. His thoughts are borrowed. His desires are marketed to him. His sense of self is built on what others see. Take away the audience and he collapses. The fear of being alone isn't just emotional, it's existential. It's the terror of facing the question, who am I when no one is watching? And for many, the answer is, I don't know. That's why solitude feels like falling apart. Because the persona, the mask, begins to crumble. But underneath that collapse lies something authentic, something ancient. Because once you confront the silence, something remarkable happens. You begin to feel a different kind of presence, and your own. You begin to sense power not from approval but from awareness. You stop needing to be seen to know that you exist. Silence becomes your teacher. It shows you the cost of conformity. It reveals how much of your identity was borrowed from fear. It teaches you to listen, not to others, but to truth. Blaise Pascal once said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." And it's true, because silence strips away the illusions that society feeds you. Without the noise, there's nothing left to hide behind. No status, no applause. No distraction, just you. I'm raw, unfiltered, unfinished. And in that stillness, the ego trembles. Because it cannot survive without an audience. But yourself, your true self, begins to awaken. It has been waiting patiently behind all the noise, waiting for the moment you finally stop running. That's why solitude transforms men. It doesn't make them cold, it makes them clear. It doesn't make them distant, it makes them real. Once you face silence, you realize that all the things you were chasing, success, validation, belonging, were just substitutes for presence. And when you find presence, you stop chasing. You begin to live differently. You choose your words carefully. You crave depth, not noise. And you no longer tolerate relationships that drain you. Because you've learned the most important truth of all. You are not incomplete when alone. You are incomplete when you need others to fill the void. When you master solitude, the world stops being a place of fear and becomes a field of choice. You're no longer reacting to the world. You're responding from awareness. You're not seeking love out of need. You're sharing it out of abundance. This is the power the philosophers understood. This is the secret society never teaches, because a man who can sit in silence and face himself is free. He cannot be controlled by loneliness. He cannot be manipulated by approval. He cannot be enslaved by fear. He has met his shadow and befriended it. He has walked through silence and found his soul. And once you've experienced that, you'll understand. It was never the silence that was dangerous. It was the noise that kept you from hearing the truth. Every generation believes it's free, until it realizes its thoughts are not its own. In the modern world, freedom is no longer taken by force. It's surrendered, silently, willingly, through distraction and conformity. We live in an age where independence is marketed, but dependency is engineered. Where men are told to think for themselves, but punished the moment they do. Look closely and you'll see it everywhere. Social media tells you what to desire. News tells you what to fear. Culture tells you what to love. Algorithms decide what you should see, what you should believe, even who you should become. And in this digital theater of illusions, individuality dies, not with a scream but with a scroll. The modern man no longer guards his mind. He trades it for belonging. He doesn't think, he reacts. He doesn't seek truth, he seeks validation. He doesn't ask what's real, he asks what's trending. This is how society kills solitude, not by isolating you, but by making you terrified of being disconnected. You've been conditioned to equate silence with insignificance. If you're not posting, you're invisible. If you're not seen, you don't exist. If you're not in the crowd, you must have failed. And so, you remain plugged in, feeding the machine that feeds on your attention. But what most men don't realize is that this constant connection isn't freedom, it's dependency disguised as relevance. Every notification, every opinion, every digital noise pulls you further away from your center. You begin to measure your worth through reflection, not of truth, but of perception. The number of followers becomes a mirror for your soul, and the silence between dopamine hits feels unbearable. You're not living, you're performing. And performance is slavery, because as long as your value depends on applause, you'll never dare to displease the crowd. That's why independent thought is vanishing, not because men are incapable of it, but because it comes with a price modern society has made unbearable: rejection. To think independently is to walk alone. And in a culture that fears solitude, that is the ultimate sin. We've built a civilization that worships the collective mind, not the individual soul. You must agree, align, obey, repeat. You must adopt the moral language of the tribe. You must feel outrage at the right time, desire the right things, hate the approved enemies, step outside that current, and the world will remind you, you're alone. That is the psychological weapon of conformity, not punishment but isolation. You're not exiled physically, you're exiled emotionally. And since most people can't survive without social approval, they surrender their thoughts for comfort. This is why solitude is revolutionary. Because when a man becomes comfortable being alone, he becomes uncontrollable. He no longer needs validation to exist. He no longer edits his truth to be accepted. He no longer measures his morality by public opinion. He starts thinking dangerously. And nothing threatens the system more than a mind that thinks for itself. Look back through history. Every philosopher, every prophet, every revolutionary began in solitude. Moses in the desert, Buddha under the tree, Nietzsche in the mountains, Christ in the wilderness, all left society to confront something deeper and returned transformed. But today, solitude is pathologized. If you withdraw, they call you depressed. If you question, they call you cynical. If you detach from noise, they call you antisocial. Because silence produces clarity, wonder, and clarity exposes lies. And our modern world cannot function if too many people start seeing clearly. The system survives on distraction, on constant stimulation, on men too exhausted to question. Because when your mind is always occupied, you never realize you're being programmed. You think your opinions are yours, but they've been pre-selected for you. You think your desires are authentic, but they've been installed through repetition. You think your beliefs make you virtuous, but they've been engineered to make you predictable. Society has perfected the art of invisible control. It doesn't need to tell you what to think. It just controls what you see. It doesn't need to forbid ideas. It just floods you with noise until truth drowns in irrelevance. And so the modern man, overwhelmed by information but starved of wisdom, lives in a permanent state of confusion. He mistakes stimulation for meaning. He mistakes noise for connection. He mistakes comfort for peace. But beneath it all, something in him still whispers, a faint memory of freedom. That whisper is the call of solitude, the ancient awareness that before you can think clearly, you must first step away. Before you can know truth, you must first face silence. Before you can find your voice, you must lose the crowd. This is the initiation every real man must go through, the separation from the herd, the death of imitation, the rebirth of mind. The world will call you arrogant, strange, even dangerous. And that's how you'll know you're on the right path. Because truth has always been dangerous to lies. And today, lies no longer live in books or governments. They live inside attention. The modern battlefield is psychological. The weapon is distraction. The victim is the individual mind. But solitude is the shield. When you detach, when you turn off the noise, you begin to see the architecture of control. You notice how easily people are manipulated by fear. You realize how society rewards obedience, not originality. You see how morality has become a fashion statement, not a compass. And in that moment of awakening, something shifts. You stop being a consumer of narratives. You become the author of your own. That's the power of solitude. It doesn't make you indifferent, it makes you sovereign. It doesn't make you cold, and it makes you clear-eyed. Because when the noise fades, you start hearing the one voice that was always real, your own. That is the independent mind, not a rebel for the sake of rebellion, but a man who has remembered how to think, and the world, terrified of such men, will call them many names: outsider, cynic, misfit, lone wolf. But those are just the labels society gives to anyone it can't control. In truth, such men are the last philosophers of our age, not the ones writing books, but the ones writing their lives in silence. Because in an era where everyone is shouting, the man who can sit quietly and think for himself is the most radical being alive. Every man must face a moment when the noise of the world becomes unbearable, and the silence within becomes unavoidable. This is the turning point. When the crowd no longer satisfies you, and the mirror of society begins to crack. When the laughter of others feels hollow and you sense, deeply, that something inside you is dying from imitation. Most men run from this feeling. They drown it in distraction. They fill it with work, sex, alcohol, validation, anything that prevents them from hearing the truth whispering from the depths. You are not who you think you are. But the man who has the courage to listen, truly listen, discovers something the world has forgotten. That solitude is not emptiness. It is preparation. In the silence, you begin to see the architecture of your own mind. You begin to notice what was installed by others and what was born from within. You start to distinguish borrowed beliefs from original thought, and in that process, the fragments of your true self start to reassemble. This is where rebirth begins. Philosophers knew this long before psychology existed. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." Schopenhauer called solitude the school of genius. Nietzsche called it the condition of spiritual maturity. They all pointed to the same law. The higher your potential, the more solitude you require, because truth is not found in comfort, it's found in confrontation. And solitude confronts you with yourself. In the crowd, you can hide behind distraction, behind identity, behind performance. But when you're alone, the mask falls. You face your weaknesses, your fears, your vanity, your need to be seen. And in that confrontation, a strange kind of strength is born, not the strength to dominate others, but the strength to master yourself. That is the essence of the warrior of stillness. He fights battles no one sees, within the mind. He slays the illusions that society worships. He kills dependency. He destroys the need for external approval. He dismantles the conditioning that has ruled him since birth. He becomes a man who no longer seeks peace from the world, because he has built it within himself. This is not weakness. It is the highest form of power. Because when you no longer depend on the external, nothing can be used against you. Criticism doesn't wound you. Rejection doesn't define you. Loneliness doesn't scare you. You become immovable. This is what Nietzsche meant when he said, "He who cannot command himself will always be a slave." And self-command begins only when you are stripped of the crowd's noise. Most men are terrified of solitude because they confuse stillness with stagnation. They think sitting in silence means nothing is happening, but silence is not inactivity, it's incubation. Just as the seed must go into darkness before it breaks into life, the man must go into solitude before he awakens his potential. You can't build an unshakable mind in the middle of chaos. You must withdraw from the collective current, stand still, and face the storm of your own thoughts until it calms. And when it does, you realize that you are not the storm. You are the one who watches it. That realization alone separates the philosopher from the herd, because the average man is dragged by his emotions, but the awakened man observes them. The average man reacts, the awakened man reflects. The average man chases pleasure, the awakened man endures pain to grow. Solitude teaches this discipline. It teaches you to be comfortable in uncertainty, to sit with your discomfort without reaching for distraction, to hold your emotions without becoming them. That's where masculine power is forged, not in noise, not in conquest, but in stillness. In stillness, you realize how little you need. You start decluttering your environment, your relationships, your mind. You stop begging life for more and start seeing how much you already have. Your desires shrink, your focus sharpens, and your sense of purpose becomes razor clear. And from that clarity, decisiveness emerges. The man who can be alone makes faster decisions because he no longer negotiates with fear. He no longer needs consensus. He acts from principle, not pressure. This is why solitude produces leaders, not followers, because leadership begins when you stop asking for permission to exist. The warrior of stillness doesn't need to shout his philosophy. His life becomes the philosophy. His calmness in chaos becomes his authority. His restraint becomes his power. His silence becomes his language. He walks through life as if nothing external can shake him, because nothing internal remains unexamined, and the world feels it. People sense when a man is truly independent. His energy carries a gravity that can't be faked. It's the aura of someone who has faced himself and emerged whole. That is the kind of man the modern world secretly fears. Because he cannot be manipulated. He doesn't crave attention. He doesn't react to propaganda. He doesn't obey trends. He has already walked through the fire, alone. And when a man has walked through the fire of solitude, he becomes untouchable. He doesn't seek meaning anymore. He creates it. He doesn't chase love. He embodies it. He doesn't beg for belonging. He carries home within him. This is the rebirth of the masculine spirit, the transformation that begins when a man stops running from silence. In solitude, you stop being a product of society and start becoming a creator of reality. You stop being a consumer of meaning and start being a maker of it. You realize that all the power you sought in the world was just a reflection of the power waiting within. And so, the man who was once afraid to be alone becomes the man who stands alone, by choice. Not in arrogance, but in awareness. Not in bitterness, but in mastery. That's the paradox of solitude. The moment you no longer need the world is the moment you finally belong to it. Because freedom is not found in separation. It's found in self-possession. And only the man who commands himself can truly walk among others without losing himself. Most men think solitude is a luxury, a retreat, a vacation from life. They are wrong. Solitude is not optional. It is essential. It is the workshop where clarity is forged, where self-mastery is practiced, where freedom is realized. But in the modern world, solitude must be chosen. It will not be given to you. The noise is everywhere: phones, social media, obligations, distractions. If you wait for silence, you will wait forever. The first step to breaking free is awareness. Notice how much of your time is dictated by others. Notice how often you reach for distraction rather than face your own thoughts. Notice how fear of being alone controls your actions. Once you see it, you can change it. Start small. Even 10 minutes a day of genuine stillness can shift your mind. Sit alone. Turn off your phone. Do nothing but observe your thoughts. At first, it will feel uncomfortable, even unbearable. Your mind will scream for distraction. But sit anyway. Endure the discomfort. That resistance is the crucible where strength is born. Next, declutter your environment. Remove the things that constantly demand attention. Notifications, unnecessary meetings, mindless scrolling, all of it. The less noise you have externally, the more clarity you will have internally. Then practice intentional solitude. Schedule time alone and guard it fiercely. Walk without headphones. Write in a journal without sharing it. Engage in physical training not to impress but to challenge yourself. Do these things because you want to know what it feels like to exist without dependency. Remember, solitude is not about avoiding people. It's about owning your life. It is about separating your identity from the expectations of others. It is about cultivating a mind that is free, calm, and unshakable. Philosophers called this self-possession. It is the art of being content with yourself even when the world disagrees. The modern man will fight you for this freedom. He will call you cold. He will call you distant. He will try to shame you for refusing distraction. Ignore him, because every step toward solitude is a step toward sovereignty. Every hour spent alone is a brick in the foundation of your independence. Every moment without distraction is an investment in clarity. Make your morning sacred. Wake up before the world. Face yourself before facing anyone else. Let your mind settle. Let your purpose take shape. Then act in the world, but never let the world act on you. The warrior of stillness does not need the crowd to define him. He doesn't measure himself by likes, attention, or approval. He has practiced being alone, and in that practice he has become complete. And as you integrate solitude, you'll notice other transformations. You stop chasing relationships built on validation. You stop seeking approval in your work. You stop measuring success by the standards of others. You begin to live life according to your own principles. Finally, remember that solitude is a lifelong practice. It is not something you do once and forget. It is a muscle, and like any muscle, it must be exercised consistently. The rewards are undeniable. Clarity of mind, independence of thought, strength of character, peace in the absence of noise. The man who practices solitude becomes untouchable by chaos. He walks through life with a calm that cannot be feigned. He makes decisions without fear. He observes without judgment. He speaks without need. This is how you break free, not with rebellion, not with aggression, not with escape, but with presence, with discipline, with the courage to be alone, and once you embrace it, you will understand. The world can no longer control you. No approval can bind you. No fear can shake you, because you have already claimed yourself. Every path worth walking comes with a price. Every truth worth learning demands a cost. Solitude is no different. When you choose to stand alone, society will push back. Friends will drift away. Opportunities may seem to vanish. You will hear criticism disguised as concern. You will be called arrogant, cold, antisocial, even broken. That is the first price. The second is discomfort. Silence will hurt at first. Your fears, insecurities, and unresolved pain will rise to the surface. You will confront parts of yourself you have ignored for years or decades. And that confrontation is not gentle. It is raw. It is piercing. It is necessary, but with every sacrifice comes a reward. And these rewards are not temporary or shallow. They are eternal. You gain freedom. Not the freedom to escape life, but the freedom to live it authentically. You gain clarity. The fog of distraction lifts and you see the world as it truly is, not as it is marketed to you. You gain sovereignty. Your thoughts, desires, and actions belong to no one but you. You gain courage, not the superficial courage that shows in public bravado, but the deep, unshakable courage that comes from facing yourself without flinching. And most importantly, you gain yourself. The philosophers understood this. Nietzsche in his mountains paid the price of isolation, but returned with insight no crowd could give him. Schopenhauer endured the judgment of society, yet produced truths that outlasted centuries. Marcus Aurelius faced solitude in the midst of empire, and wrote a guide for living that still teaches men to master themselves. The path is not easy, and that is the point. Because wisdom that costs nothing is never worth having. Comfort never transforms. Ease never awakens the mind. If you wish to escape the price, you will also escape the reward. The world may seem easier when you chase approval, when you fill every moment with noise, when you avoid silence. But you will never know the power of clarity, the strength of independence, the peace of self-possession. The men who stand alone do so knowing the stakes. They accept loneliness, discomfort, and judgment because they understand the value of mastery. They know that a life lived in conformity is not life, and it is survival. You too must decide. Will you surrender to the crowd, to the endless noise, to the illusions that mask emptiness? Or will you step into solitude, face yourself, and pay the price for freedom? Because the truth is brutal, not all men can bear it. Many will turn back. Many will cheat the process, returning to distraction and false comfort. But those who endure, those who choose themselves over the crowd, are changed forever. They move through the world differently. They are quieter, but more commanding. They are calm, but unshakable. They are present, but untouchable. And when they speak, their words carry weight, not because they seek attention, but because they speak from reality. This is the reward that society cannot take away. This is the treasure hidden from the uninitiated. This is the secret of men who live alone, think clearly, and act freely. So embrace the solitude. Pay the price. Endure the discomfort. Walk the lonely path, because at the end you do not merely survive. You become whole. You become free. You become a man who owns himself, utterly, completely, without apology. And in that ownership lies a power the crowd can never understand. A power that cannot be taken, borrowed, or copied. A power born in silence, tempered in solitude, and forged in truth. This is the ultimate lesson. This is the masculine truth. This is why staying alone is not a loss. It is the best decision you will ever make.